Okay, we are being recorded.
Okay, good. Let's go ahead.
So the first thing I want to ask is, what was your relationship with the department, and how did that relationship come about?
So I was department head for biochemistry and molecular biology from March 2005 until July 2008. And that came about because I was invited to apply for this role when it came up, when George Mackey was going to step down. The previous department head was going to step down, and I applied for the position and was fortunate to be given the job.
Did you always have ambitions of becoming department head?
I looked like a good opportunity, but it wasn't something I'd really thought deeply about before I was invited to apply.
Okay,
I
and
was
how
based
about
in Scotland at that time, and it hadn't really occurred to me to become a department head in Canada from where I was at that point.
okay? So just to clarify, so you were not part of this department before becoming department head. You came
I
here and
was
then
not a member of the department beforehand. No, I was recruited from outside.
I see. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And
While I was department head, um, it was the time when the LSI was just coming into operation,
yeah,
and after the interim head Julian Davies stepped down, there was difficulty in finding a full-time director for the LSI, and Chris Norse from physiology, and Charles Thompson from microbiology and immunology were asked if we'd be happy to take it in turns to be acting head of the LSI. So I was department head and also for quite a lot of the time LSI director as well.
wow,
So
those are two pretty big
Charles and
jobs.
I got on pretty well, and I think we formed a really good team, and I enjoyed working with those two guys as interim directors.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard in other interviews, the transfer to the LSI was a big step for the department as a whole, and I understand there's a lot of disruptions. Would you mind expanding on that and how you dealt with those disruptions?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So, of course, I was in the middle of a huge disruption anyway because I was moving from Scotland to Canada. So my disruption might have been bigger than anybody else's, actually. And I guess there was a lot of disruption. People don't like change very much, Eli, in general. And it wasn't clear how the LSI was going to really function in the absence, particularly of a director and a good budget for running the building. And I guess people were concerned. They had lots of questions about how that was all going to work. And to be honest, between you and me and whoever else listens to this video, um, not a lot of thought had been given to the operations of the building. For example,
Hmm.
even the stores, even ordering stuff, hadn't really been thought through. So there were a lot of challenges, and I took it upon myself to try to solve many of those challenges, which proved to be a difficult and often quite frustrating job.
Yeah, I
But we
can
did make
imagine.
some progress. We made considerable progress, but of course, I didn't achieve all of my objectives in the time I was there.
Right. So then, bringing this into our second question, would you say the majority of your work in our department had to do with the logistics of setting up the LSI, or were there other things you'd like to discuss?
Sure. So, as department head, of course, I had quite a lot to do in that role, running the department. The LSI directorship did take up too much of my time, probably. Perhaps I was unwise to try to take on all those problems myself. Perhaps I should have uh, just tackled some of them. And in addition to that, I also ran a research group of up to about 15 people, postdocs, grad students, undergrad students, and technicians. So I had a pretty busy role. In addition, of course, to setting up a new group in Vancouver, having come from Scotland. I was really fortunate, Eli, that 7 of my team in Scotland actually followed me to UBC. So I had a kind of hot start. I had a lot of well-trained people who were already very familiar with their projects before we actually started the lab in UBC. And in addition to that, I served on quite a few Faculty of Medicine panels and review committees. So it was quite a busy time.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you had those students come with you, but setting up a lab, starting the LSI, being head of the department, all three of those things seem like a mountain in and of themselves, and then doing them all at the same time. How did you manage to deal with those challenges and give them each the space they needed?
So that's a really good question. And I did have to work really long hours, Eli. It was pretty hard going at times. But I had quite a lot of help from a number of people. Sabrina Cheng, who was the department administrator at that time, was enormously helpful. She was fantastic. I think she retired 6 or 7 years ago, but without her, I couldn't have achieved very much at all because she was just so motivated and organized. And I was going to mention these people later on, but I'll maybe mention them now. A number of members of the faculty, most of whom have now moved on to retirement, particularly Roger Brownsey, Ross McGillivray, and Michelle Roberge were very helpful in terms of me getting into the job and making some progress.
Right. Yeah. All big names. What was moving on? What was the department culture like at that time?
I think we might have partly answered this question already, Eli, because the dominant thing I think in the department at that time was the uncertainty of having moved or being in the process of moving to the LSI. So what I remember from the first few months I was there was a lot of questions and doubts even that people had about the LSI as an organization. Biochemistry, of course, had been in a quite old building, in the COP building, which may or may not still exist. I don't know whether it does. It's over by the bus loop. And people, as I mentioned earlier, are often very cautious about change. They don't like their environment or their operations changing. And for me, that was the dominant thing about the department at that time. But it was a department where people got on well, and which is obviously a very successful department with some really excellent faculty members, instructors, and students and postdocs. So it was a positive atmosphere in that respect, certainly, but it was tinged by this caution about what does the LSI mean for us and where are we going in the next 10 or 20 years.
Right. Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So moving on to our next question, and I assume the LSI is going to have something to do with this, but what was your proudest contribution to the department?
So I was only there for 3.5 years, Eli. So my contributions were therefore modest, and probably other people can judge much better than I can whether I had any impact and what that impact was. But I would mention, I think, 4 or 5 things. One is I was keen to help develop the careers of the younger members of the department, both PIs, faculty members, and the educators, the instructors in the department. And I think I achieved something along those lines to help them develop their careers in the right direction. One thing I was very keen to do, based on what I'd experienced in Scotland, which had a very positive and team-orientated culture, was to try to develop an open and inclusive culture in our department, because it was a bit, I don't want to say too much because I might get myself into trouble, but the atmosphere wasn't terribly inclusive when I arrived, and I hope I managed to improve that. And I think I also managed to improve the financial status of the department as well. It had some issues when I arrived, and particularly together with Sabrina Cheng, we managed to solve those problems.
Yeah, well, I know from a...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know from my experience here and from others I've talked to, the department definitely feels very open. So, I mean, if you've had a role in that, which I believe you have, then thank you for making the experience for all of us grad students here just that much better.
I'm glad that culture has remained. I wouldn't like to see that it had faded away.
Yeah.
So we did a number of things. 2 of the things we did were to have regular poster sessions, because the department had people or associate faculty members who were not in the LSI. And we wanted to try and get everybody together. So on Friday afternoons, once every month or 6 weeks, we have a poster session where students, postdocs, faculty all got together to talk about science and also just to meet each other and have a bit of a conversation. And I think
that was your initiative?
That was my initiative, yeah.
No, you'll be happy to hear that that's still going on. We have it on Thursdays instead of Fridays.
I'm really delighted to hear that. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And the other thing that started during my time was an annual retreat.
So we don't quite have those annually, but especially after COVID. But I have been to one my time here.
Yeah. So we started those in around 2007, I think. And the first one, the main thing I remember about the first one was that it was extremely cold. We had this out at Loon Lake in the forest, and I was okay because my room had heating, but most of the rooms had no heating, and people were perishing cold and complained about it the next morning. So February was not the ideal time to do that.
I'm guessing that was sometime in February, which is why it was so cold.
Absolutely, yeah. But it went well, and I believe it's continued for a while after I left. COVID, I'm sure, created a big problem with holding anything like that.
Yeah, I think our last one was in February of 2023.
Oh, so, okay, not so long. Okay,
yeah, and I know our current head, Jorg Kaspuna, he wants to bring it back. So
okay,
yeah. So thank you for having that. I had a lot of fun in my retreat.
Okay, fantastic. You're a grad student, Eli, or what's your?
Yes, I'm a grad student. Yeah.
And who's your boss?
Calvin Yip, who's set up this meeting for us.
Oh yeah, he's a structural biologist, isn't he?
At heart, definitely. We're trying to move more into the cell aspect, but we also want to maintain that structural side, diversify.
Right. Right. Because I followed some of his work because he did the structures of some of the protein complexes that we were interested in during his postdoc.
Yeah, no, he's done some amazing work. So
indeed.
But getting back on topic. So I know you weren't there for very long. So maybe I'll alter this next question a little. You said that at the beginning of your time at the department head, there's a lot of uncertainty. Throughout your time as that head, do you find that as people adjusted to the LSI, that faded away quite a bit? And how was the culture when you left?
Okay, so I think the concerns about the LSI did to some extent get less, they dissipated, partly because it was clear the organization was going to work. We were in the department, you could do experiments, things were all right, and I think many people enjoyed being in a much better laboratory space than they had been in the old COP building, and also the proximity to other researchers in other departments was certainly beneficial to me because I had collaborations with people in physiology and also in microbiology and immunology. So those probably wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been in the same physical space. So that was a positive direction. And I think another important thing that happened while I was department head was we recruited a number of really good new members of faculty. Those included, I'm going to say included because I might forget one, Leonard Foster, Eric Jan, Thibaut Mayor, and Philip van Petterham. They all joined during my time. And we also either recruited or stabilized the positions of the instructors, Warren Williams, Scott Covey, and Jason Reed. So those are all really good people. And I was really delighted to see that they're still in the department and they're continuing to contribute to the department's teaching and research objectives.
Yeah, definitely. They're all still doing amazing work. I'm not sure if you know, but Leonard actually became head of the department for...
That's right. I was in touch with him recently, actually, because we had a collaboration for a while. And yes, I realized he'd been given the job of department head, which he held for quite some time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I like Leonard a lot. And the other thing we tried to do during my tenure of that position was to update the curriculum, because the curriculum was a bit ossified in the past, and we wanted to bring it up to date and modernize it. So particularly together with Ross McGillivray, we did a review of the curriculum to try and bring it into the 21st century.
And how successful do you think you were in that time?
Well, in that time, it was a limited time, obviously. So we made some progress. I hope that's continued. Obviously, it takes a while. It's a 3 or 4 year course. So obviously, it takes a little while for those things to filter through to the entire teaching curriculum. But we did make progress, and people could see we were trying to improve the teaching experience for our students.
Yeah. Did that have anything to do with the teaching faculty and the expansion of that, or more responsibilities for them, or in any sense of that?
Well, yeah, particularly Warren was really keen to do that. And I worked with him. I also worked obviously together with Scott and Jason. And there was a guy called Robert Morris at that time as well. He's no longer there, I don't think. And particularly Whip Warren was really enthusiastic about pushing things forward and updating the curriculum and improving the teaching program in general. So that was great to work with him.
Excellent.
And what I enjoyed about the department was a lot of enthusiasm from members of the department for working with me and basically improving the way in which the department operated. So that was a very positive experience for me. And particularly, just going back to the earlier part of this conversation, when we arrived, of course, we were in a new place and several people made us feel particularly welcome. Ross, Roger, and Michelle were particularly helpful to us. And at one stage, we were effectively homeless. We had nowhere to live. And Robert and Laurie Mulday kindly let us stay in their house for a week while they were away. So we actually had a comfortable place to live rather than going from one room to another in the university accommodation, which was not very satisfactory. I had a young daughter at the time, so it was tricky.
I mean, that's very generous of them.
It was, yeah. So it was great. Really helped us a lot. So I pick out those people as being particularly helpful, but there are other people, of course, who were also really good to us when we arrived.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up stories like that. Those are the exact things we want to celebrate in our department.
Yeah. So Bob's still there, or maybe he's retired now. I don't know.
Bob is still there. He actually has the lab. It works right next to our lab.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I see him quite often.
Okay. Maybe you're in the same space as we used to have a long time ago.
Possibly 5th floor.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of by the elevators.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're in the exact same spot then.
Okay. So welcome to our space.
Thank you. I quite enjoy it.
We vacated 17 years ago.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question. What, as either a scientist or as a person, what do you think you've gotten out of our department and how has it shaped who you are today?
Okay, so this was my first experience of being a department head and my first experience of being an institute director. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how things operate and sometimes about how they don't work very well. I learned a lot about administration, which sounds a boring topic, but is actually really important if you're in a role like that. I learned a lot about working with people, which has benefited me in the long term. And I also had some pretty good collaborations. One of those was with Leonard Foster, which resulted in a paper probably about 5 years or so after I left UBC. So that was quite a long-running collaboration. So I gained quite a lot, and that's helped me in the 2 jobs I've had since then. One was after we went back to the UK. I was head of something called molecular biosciences at the University of Southampton, and the experience I gained in UBC certainly helped me a lot in that role. So that was very important. And then 11 years ago, we moved to Australia, and I became head of a section of our institute, which is now the largest single part of the institute, about 300 researchers. And the experience I got at UBC in terms of administration, people management, financial management, and research strategy also helped me a lot in that role. I don't think I could have taken on that role had I not had the experience I gained at UBC.
Yeah. Well, I know it's a tall task to distill all that knowledge into these short questions, or these short answers, I should say. But if you were to give some advice to either a head of the department or just someone organizing large groups of people, what would you say to them?
That's a good question. I think, and this sounds like a cliche, but it's really around teamwork. You have to take the team with you. You can't tell people what to do. You can consult with people and find out what they want to achieve and help them to achieve that. And that makes people feel more part of the operation of the place, which is, I hope, is part of what I achieved when I was department head at UBC, and also makes them realize that you're on their side. If there are problems, they're not problems you are creating, they're problems that pre-existed, and you're going to work with them to tackle those problems. So as part of that, communication is a very, very important thing. If there are difficulties, which means their life becomes a bit harder, it's really important to explain why those difficulties have arisen and how I or we can actually tackle them. Otherwise, people feel a bit isolated from the department. And often, if you don't understand why the problem's arisen, you get really cross because you think, oh my goodness, this is a real hassle. If you understand why this hassle has arisen, then perhaps it doesn't help you dramatically in the day-to-day, but at least you understand why it works this way. It's not just because people are trying to be difficult.
Yeah,
so
definitely. I mean,
communication was probably the thing I learned was the most important. And I've seen problems with communication in various places. It was a problem in my institute here for a while.
Well, you said it is cliche. However, it's cliche for a reason. It's very much true. Fight the problem, not the person, as one
exactly. Very good catchphrase.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I guess you've already answered this question, but perhaps we can go about it in more of a general sense. What message would you like to give the current members of the department?
I mean, from what I can see, the department's doing really well. You've got some great faculty members. You're publishing well. I can't assess your grant funding status from here, but the future looks very bright. And I would say, you just keep on doing what you're doing already. Times can be difficult. Grants fail. Papers get rejected. But as we all know, you just have to deal with that and keep going, basically, which is what I think I've done through my career. I think there's a big change coming or in process at the moment for research and teaching, which is the advent of AI. And that's something that is really going to affect what you guys do day to day a lot, I think, in the next decade or so. We might talk about that more a bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think AI is going to change the lab. I've heard similar things from other PIs as well. But actually, if you want to speak on that now, I think now is as good as time as ever to mention it.
So obviously AI is already having a huge impact. We've seen the advent of programs like AlphaFold through to AlphaFold 3, which is probably influencing Calvin's kind of work, including being able to predict protein ligand interactions, which is really important, for example, for drug discovery. We've seen new antibiotics coming along thanks to AI-driven drug design. And in addition to that, there was another program called AlphaGenome, which claims to predict the effect of mutations remote from a gene on the expression of that gene. If this works, then that's going to be another revolutionary change in terms of molecular biology. And of course, using large data really ought to help us to come up with new hypotheses. When I talked to members of my lab, we came up with an idea, a hypothesis, but we may have missed a lot of possibilities just because we weren't thinking widely enough. And I think AI is going to help us to develop new hypotheses and to design experiments to test them. So this is going to influence research a lot, as you already know, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on biochemistry. It already is. These programs I've already mentioned are essentially biochemistry-oriented programs, AlphaFold and AlphaGenome. And the other really important part of this, I think, is that the teaching programs of the department need to take this into account. Students need to get training in using AI and in data science in order to prepare them for their future careers. Being stuck with an old-fashioned biochemistry program isn't going to cut it in 5 years' time. Students need exposure to that, and that might well mean the department collaborating with other departments within the university who can provide that input into data science, data management, the potentials and the problems of AI. So I think that's a really important thing to take into consideration for the future of teaching programs, not just at the graduate level, but at the undergrad level as well.
Well put. I'm actually going to skip the third last question, since I think we've already sufficiently covered that matter. For our second last question, what legacy do you think this department has created?
I mean, the department creates legacies in all kinds of ways, actually. One is the research that it does and the publications it produces and the things it enables. And I was particularly struck by what's happening with Peter Cullis. Peter Cullis's work has now become a really important new way of drug delivery, which wasn't really on the map that much when I was there, but with the advent of mRNA-based therapeutics or vaccines or whatever, this has become really important. And I think that's an excellent example of pioneering basic research, providing a legacy to the world in terms of new ways of drug delivery. And other people in the department, like Bob Mulday, are also doing this through their translational research, in his case for macular degeneration, for example. So that's one kind of legacy. Another kind of legacy is the people it trains. That's possibly the most important legacy. If you train really gifted scientists or whatever, then they go on to achieve a lot in their careers subsequently. And I think it's also created a legacy in terms of being one of the best research departments in the university, is setting an example for other departments to try to match. You know, the track record of biochemistry and molecular biology is outstanding.
Excellent. I especially love I've heard the topic of trainees come up throughout virtually all of these interviews. And yeah, I can say that I'm so privileged to work alongside such excellent students. So well put.
So that's something I'd like to say too, Eli. I meant to say this earlier, but one thing that really struck me at UBC was the quality of the undergrad. I had some co-op students in my lab too. They were really outstanding, intelligent, highly motivated, got on with things. So I was really impressed by them. I'm sure it's still the same, but we're very talented students in BMB. And yeah, so the other thing is, I retired fairly recently, and I was asked to give a retirement seminar to the department. And one of the things that really struck me was looking back at my trainees, and I'm sure other people can do that in your department as well. You can see what they've achieved. They've become professors in universities in various places, in Europe and North America, and others are in the biotech or pharma industries. So I like to think of that as part of my legacy of having trained those people who are now in important positions in academia or in industry.
Certainly. I mean, the breadth of which your influence can reach is truly quite astounding when you think about what everyone from not only this department but other departments you've worked in have achieved. So that's excellent.
Yeah, it's very broad. As I say, it's not just academia, it's also a huge range of aspects of industry, or even in the medical writing area as well. One of my former postdocs is a medical writer now, and he does a really great job of promoting and explaining medical research.
Yeah, super important in today's climate, let's say.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, maybe don't want to go there, but yes, we're very much aware of the misinformation that's around.
Indeed. So the final question I have for you on this list is, what do you think the department should focus on in the next 25 years?
That's a tough question. I don't want to tell people what to do, as I told you earlier. And it's also a very broad department, so you're not going to focus on one thing, to the exclusion of anything else. I tried to write down a couple of answers to this, one of which we've already dealt with, which is the impact of AI and big data on research. And that's something that obviously any researchers should try to embrace going forward. That's not focusing on something, that's exploiting something that's now available, and as we've said, is going to revolutionize many areas of research. And the other thing is, as I mentioned again earlier, the translational research that's going on in the department. I think that's really important, both in terms of its impact on health and medicine, the stuff that Peter Cullis and Bob Moulty, and I'm sure other people too that I've forgotten to look up the details of, are doing. And also that's really important because it's crucial to explain to the general public why we do research, why taxpayers pay good money, a CIHR, whoever, to fund research. And justification for that partly is just the seeking new knowledge, but it also has to be how this impacts on people's lives through changes in healthcare or diagnosis or whatever it is. So I think that kind of research, whether it's fundamental research or more applied research, is crucially important. It's a broad portfolio that's important, and publicizing that research is also crucial, not just in journals, but also in terms of public outreach, telling the public what great stuff is going on and how it's going to affect them or their families in the future.
Excellent. Is there any final comments you'd like to make to the department?
I would say I really enjoyed working in UBC, in the Biochemistry and Molecular Biology department. I had, as I mentioned earlier, some great colleagues and some great experiences. It was pretty productive time for my lab, and I really enjoyed the experience of working in biochemistry and molecular biology. Sorry I wasn't able to stay there longer.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview.
My pleasure, Eli, and thank you very much for your very provocative and interesting questions.
All right, have a great day and good luck, or have fun in your retirement.
Okay, thank you very much, Eli, and I wish you success with your PhD and your subsequent career.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks for talking to you today.
You as well.
Okay,
Goodbye.
have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.